Although it was like pulling teeth to get him to admit it, Ed was a former Navy SEAL, very deployed, very active, real deal, but he's so soft-spoken and humble you'd never know it. Beyond that, he's a professional dive master and a rep for Scubapro, one of the largest, most famous scuba gear manufacturers to exist. You know the name. We talk about going from a Navy SEAL to recreational diver and what kind of things he's experienced, what it's like working for Scubapro and being on the equipment side of things. As always, I'll give you my opinion on something we talk about that might be considered controversial at the end of the video. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or rate, depending on what platform you're listening or watching. And finally, I hope you enjoy the show.
Thanks. Good to see you.
You too.
Good to finally meet you in person.
Yeah. We've been following each other on Instagram for a while.
Yep.
You got a killer page, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So you now work for Scubapro.
Yep.
Before that, how did you get into diving?
26 years in the Navy, in the U.S. Navy. I always say U.S. Navy because I deal with a lot of other countries. Got into diving when I was real young, 18, 19 years old. Got out of the Navy in 2013. A couple years later, got introduced to the president of Scubapro, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said nothing. I was actually working for 2 other companies at the time, and ended up working for Scubapro.
Obviously, you were drawn to that if you were working somewhere else, and you're like, yes.
Was still around the military people, but I love the water. I love being in the water. I think the water's truly the most amazing. It's a gift. It helps with all sorts of stuff.
I agree with that. More than just going around.
Health-wise, I think it's just, now there are studies coming out. I don't want to sound super smart, but seeing the water every day makes you feel better, fixes your brain, does this, does that. So,
right,
yeah.
If you see water. Do you believe that fully, or is there like probably sometime?
I believe that wholeheartedly, that being around the water, even if it's a pool, is good for you.
This is how I know you're the real deal. You glossed over a very interesting, you already know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You glossed over, you said, oh, I was in the U.S. Navy for a while, and then I started work. What did you do in the Navy?
So I did 26 years in the Navy. I did 2 years in the fleet on a ship, and this shows how old I am. The ship is the USS Midway, which is a museum out in San Diego now. The rest of the time I was in the Navy. I was in Naval Special Warfare, so I was in the SEAL teams.
He's not going to come out and say it, but he was a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
There you go. Dirty work's done.
Okay. Yeah.
Having done all that, I mean, that had to have sharpened your skills going into the recreational side of things.
I'm going to say this, and people aren't going to like me for this one, but in the military, you're taught how to dive as far as like getting in the water and being comfortable, but you're not really taught to be a proficient diver. So you're not really taught how to dive as far as buoyancy, all that other stuff. It's just kind of glossed over. It's like put a lot of weight on, go down. I didn't really become a good diver, I think, until I started working for Scubapro. Like my first couple dives, and you'll see videos of divers in the military and they're swimming like this. And you know, people comment, oh, he looks like, well, that's how you do it. You know, I don't want to shoot to the surface no matter what happens. So worst case scenario, I would rather go down than up. Truly, both of them will kill you, but one's, you know, could be a bullet to the head.
So that, like, obviously there was no, after doing what you did, there was no lingering fear of the water or anything like that. No. Again, I love the water. If I could decide the day and how I die, it'll probably just be going in the water and dying of like a shallow water blackout instead of suffering, you know what I mean? I have never had a shallow water blackout, but I feel like you're just going to go to sleep. You really should be wearing the red hat because you're like the man of the sea over here. What one skill from being a Navy SEAL do you think has translated into the recreational world that has helped you?
More than anything is probably the ability to talk to people. And I know that sounds crazy. You're like, oh, but dealing with people in different countries all over the world, you have to talk to people. Whether you like them or not, you have to talk to them. So I think that is probably the biggest thing that's transferred over.
So you think it's communication skills with like other divers?
I do, yeah. I think more than anything. I mean, for instance, how you and I met. It was literally us just, hey, wow, he's got some cool stuff, and not being afraid to say, hey, you've got some cool stuff.
Yeah, supporting each other.
Exactly, yeah. And the military is all about supporting each other.
You were in the Navy, you were a Navy SEAL, and then you went to the civilian world. You eventually started working for Scubapro.
Yep.
What was it that drew you to Scubapro?
I've always known about Scubapro. I have pictures of when I was younger diving with Scubapro gloves on. They're just Ralph Lauren of diving. They're the premier company. And I'm not saying this because I work for them. If somebody,
you wouldn't say the opposite.
No, but what I will say is if another company makes a better product, then I'll tell my friends to go use that, but then I work with Scubapro to make ours better to meet what their needs are. But it truly is just a good company. It's a family-owned company. It's a good brand.
That's Johnson Outdoors.
Johnson Outdoors is, yeah. So SC Johnson Wax, a family company. That's the brother.
Really?
Johnson Outdoors is the sister, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Wow. I thought I knew all the little nuggets. Really?
Yeah. Scubapro was also started by a former, he was a UDT, but he was a SEAL.
Okay, well, this doesn't look very Navy SEAL-y nowadays. And that's something I got to give it to Scubapro. They've been very much on the forefront with colors and looking good.
Yeah.
And their branding is just on point. You know, I'm big into branding myself.
Yeah.
So they do a killer job with that. Having worked for Scubapro, you started 6 years ago to now. What opinion do you have that's done a 180?
That military and recreational divers are far apart as far as, what they do is different, what recreational do is different, but in the big picture of life, it's all breathing underwater. A lot of people are like, oh, I could never do what you did. I'm sure you have. I'm sure you've been in blackout water or something like that. First time I dove with Scubapro, it was two of their ambassadors testing out a new computer. I had not dove in the daytime in 10 years. Everything I'd done is at night or like in a pool. So I go down to I go down to Miami and I'm diving with them, and I hadn't dove open circuit in forever, and I was like, hey, I have no idea how to set this up. I've never seen this stuff before. This is all new to me. Our stuff is all old. They looked at me like, you're supposed to know what you're doing, and I was like, honestly, I don't. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. To me, the funny part is like with civilians, everybody just kind of hops in the water. With the military, somebody has to look at you before you, so they all hopped in the water. I was like, oh, nobody's looking at me. All right, I guess I get in the water. So yeah.
Maybe they should.
So they were two very senior divers. They were like, our boss said you were coming in, you were a SEAL. And he goes, you get a lot of people that tell you that. And he goes, but I could tell you're comfortable with who you are because you didn't just try to pretend to set it up and do it wrong. You were like, hey, I don't know what this is. Show me the right way to do it.
That brings me to something I want to ask you. At the end of the day, I mean, you've got it. You work for Scubapro, you're a Navy SEAL, you dive in all the rebreathers and everything. Black water for years, all that. You can speak to this. I would say one of the biggest mistakes people have is when they go to a boat, everyone's like afraid to say, hey, I might need some help over here. And people always ask me hey, I'm going diving here and been a while. What do you suggest? I get that in the comments all the time. You probably get that.
Yep.
And I always just say, tell them, hey, I'm new, or I haven't done this in a while. I haven't used your gear. And I always say, let them help you. And they will respect you more. The one that's like, I got it, you're like, oh gosh, now I can't help them, but now I have to watch them because that's probably the problem person. What is that? Like, why do you suppose we do it? How do we fix that?
The biggest thing is being comfortable in your own skin. Being able to truly just say, hey, you can pretend a little bit and say, hey, I've never seen this before. Can you show me? This is new to me. If you're renting gear, people are like, oh, I never use this one. I normally use the higher end stuff. Okay.
We hear that one a lot. This isn't my stuff.
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing is being comfortable in your own skin and not being afraid to ask for help. And I'm sure you get this a lot. Hey, do you know anybody that I can get a discount from? Okay, well, you've asked me for help for that. Why won't you ask me for help on how to set your gear up or something like that? I think also one of the biggest, and I'm going to say problems, and you're probably going to get in trouble if you post this, with the dive industry is I can take a class in 2 to 3 days and then I'm set out on my own. What true skill have you ever learned in 2 to 3 days that you could do 2 years from now? Really nothing as far as technically setting something up. So if I don't buy my own gear and have my own gear and always have it set up in front of me or have a reference to go back to look at it. I learned to dive this weekend, and a year from now I go to Mexico to dive. Of course I'm not going to remember how to set something up or how to turn my computer on and get it to pair or do something like that. And again, I'm not bad mouthing the dive industry, but it's an easy thing to go, okay, you've done your weekend course and you're good.
I've been trying to get to the bottom of that problem for years. And I at one time I was guilty. I had a dive shop. Problem is the other dive shop does it. For a driver's license you have to
like 6 months.
And this is something everybody does, and it still takes that long.
Yeah.
Scuba diving is way more rare and nuanced than driving. We've been driving for generations. Everywhere you turn, there's a car.
And you grew up watching somebody do it too.
In the car.
So you have 16 years of watching someone. Yeah, it's a great way to look at it.
I don't know how we fix it, but and I get where it's coming from. Hey, we can get you certified and get them in, and hopefully that doesn't matter after that part. Hopefully
You brought it up in one of your posts the other day where you get instructors that are so afraid of they're just telling you how things are going to go wrong and how they're so rigid that you're not having fun with it, where you can forget to have fun. When people ask me, hey, is it hard to dive? No, you go underwater and you just don't forget to breathe. When it's all said and done, that's what you're doing.
Right. What is something you see, a commonly held belief in the dive industry today that you just passionately disagree with?
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to be real quick. If you want to support this channel, go to sweetwaterscuba.com. Info's in the description. You can get the blue shirts, the red hat, the vinyl holographic tank stickers that everybody seems to love, and of course the autographed children's books that come directly from me. And back to the show.
The dive industry to me is very much like the car industry, like car collectors or gun collectors. If you were a gun guy and you're a Glock guy, and I tell you to buy a SIG, or you're a Ford guy, and I tell you to buy a Chevy, there's nothing I can do to change your mind. So that is the same way in the dive industry. Very rarely will you see somebody out diving that has everything head to toe, especially a military person, head to toe in one company's gear. If they have our gloves on, let's tell everybody why we should wear our gloves. If they have our mask, this is why you should wear this mask, or this mask for this situation and another one for that situation. So I think the brand loyalty thing is something that I don't agree with as far as the military goes in public safety divers, because some people are so loyal to a brand that they're not getting the right equipment for the right job.
And
sometimes.
so instead of chastising them, and why aren't you in head to toe in brand X?
Yeah.
Hey, they are wearing our this, so let's show everyone that they like our glove.
It isn't necessarily just a brand thing, but like you have to have this on you at all times. Okay, why? Tell me why. Well, in case this, but has that ever...
My dad had it, my uncle, my instructor had it. Yeah. And that's most people in diving. If you ask what kind of gear, they will tell you, and it starts out with, I love my, and then fill in the blank with the one or two things I have ever used. Never drove another car ever, and the only one you've ever bought, you say you love.
Yep.
What do you suppose that is in scuba diving? It's almost impossible once someone's made up their mind with a particular brand. Why won't people branch out? Like what is that? Try new things.
So I think it's all part of being part of like a club. Everybody wants to be a club, and I joke that like, how do you know if somebody does CrossFit? They'll tell you. How do you know if somebody's loyal to Scubapro? They'll tell you. Loyal to Aqualung? They'll tell you. And it's part of being a club. Everybody wants to be part of something.
So I think it's an identity?
I think it is. For some people, it is their identity. Harley Davidson guys. Could you get a Harley Davidson guy to drive an Indian? Probably not.
No. Yeah. Her dad drives one.
So exactly. When it's all said and done, do they allow you to go underwater and breathe air? Yeah.
I think it's refreshing to see people approach it honestly.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be a jack of all trades but a master of none.
You can ask me what I don't like about Scubapro?
No.
The one piece of gear that I don't... Snorkels. I see no point. I only see a very, very rare point for snorkels when you're snorkeling. In the military, we used to carry them, and we would cut them down so they were smaller, and we'd be like, oh, if you ever have to hide under a pier, you could have it.
That's a big one we've talked about. We said, you know, you can do the roll-up ones, put it in your pocket.
Yeah. We have our apnea snorkel that it's roll-up, and that's what I say for, again, if somebody's going to make you carry one.
Actually, look at this. There's no snorkel here.
Yeah.
Or there.
And once you get certified, you put it in your pocket.
I've seen people in an aquarium where there's no chop, there's no nothing. They will not let go of that snorkel just to go down controlled indoor aquarium.
Again,
what is that?
I think it falls into the training. You were trained to do it that way, and nobody's ever told you it was okay not to.
So Navy SEAL.
Didn't say that.
Not a big former Navy SEAL. He didn't say it, but I'm saying it. He's very modest.
I didn't say that, yeah.
If you can be modest about being a Navy SEAL, I think people could be modest about their skill level when they come onto a boat.
1,000%, yeah.
If you are a dive master instructor, course director, whatever, it's better not to, if you're just diving for fun, it's better not to say that. Big time.
But on that same note, as a diver, it doesn't matter what your skill level is. If you're on a boat and you see somebody putting their stuff together wrong, instead of going, hey, you can't do it that way, just, hey, how about I give you a hand with that? Looks like you're having some trouble, or just be polite about it, you know?
Right.
So on both sides.
I don't know if they're all as mild-mannered as
you. 90% of us, 99% are. Special forces, military, even military in general.
The few people that I have gotten to know personally that truly worked in special forces, you would never know it. And I think if you've really done it, you don't feel like you have something to prove, maybe?
Yeah, I don't really throw the SEAL card out. If it's a public safety person, I'm like, hey, I've been in muddy water too. I know what you're looking to do. Because sometimes they just think you're a salesperson that dives in this. And I'm like, hey, now that I'm with Scubapro, I get to do this, but I was never doing this before.
I want to go back to the snorkel thing. That one seems to be a lightning rod.
Okay.
We've said this before on our show, the snorkels sometimes cause more trouble than they help.
Than it's worth, yeah.
And there are cases for them, but I mean, where do you see the snorkel as far as ocean diving goes?
I'm going to give you the politically correct answer. Like anything else, it's a tool. Do you need it all the time? No. There's that one time that you will need it, like say, you get to the surface and it's choppy and the waves are breaking over you and you're running out of air, so you put that on. But you're training everybody for that one worst case scenario instead of the other things during that 99% of the dive that you don't need it on. So if you're going into a reef or you're going somewhere like that and it hits it or it breaks it, now you've just broken something in the water or you get tangled in something. then you've got this thing with some fishnet on it that didn't need to be there to begin with, but you're training for that one worst case scenario.
The other thing is too with boat diving, now that I'm thinking about it, you're right, the odds of being up there, no buoyancy, out of air, and you need the snorkel are pretty low. I'd say I've never been in that situation.
And if you truly inflate your BC all the way, your head's above the water. Yeah, if it's really bad out, I get it.
Also, you could ditch your weights. And then for the boat to not be right there, I mean, this is such a thousands of dives, and I've never been in a situation like that.
No.
Yeah, you're right. You're training for the less than a micro fraction of a percent to have problems for the other 99.9%. And like you said, you can just carry one like this. But I've also seen it where it's caused panic, where someone the regulator came out of their mouth, they grabbed the snorkel instead. I've seen that happen 100 times.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that,
You know, if you're new, the task load, my BC, stuff just slapping you in the face.
Yeah, it takes away from the enjoyment of it too.
It does. Cool, I think we're on the same page with that.
Okay.
What's your favorite thing about working for Scubapro?
The people in Scubapro, but also being able to give back, to be around military people, public safety people, like-minded people, still being able to, help with knowledge that I think has been lost. So again, that's why I started my Instagram account, is I would be with somebody and they wouldn't know how to defog their mask or flame their mask or do something like, they're just skills that have been lost. And I like being around the younger guys and helping with stuff like that, like the old grandpa, I guess, helping stuff out.
Is it safe to say part of working for Scubapro and diving is the social element?
Definitely, yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, Ed, last big tough question here.
Okay.
When you're not repping for Scubapro and you're not diving, what are you doing for fun?
Honestly, walking my dogs. We have 2 dogs, so hanging out with the dogs, walking the dogs.
You know that's a good answer,
yeah,
too, don't
yeah.
you? Well, Ed, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And like I said, it's great to finally meet you in person.
Hey, back at you.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ed. Don't forget to subscribe or rate the show depending on where you're watching or listening. And finally, here it is, my opinion on probably the biggest hot button issue. Although I kind of already gave it in the show, it's snorkels. We've had countless episodes on this. I do not wear one on ocean dives. Yes, even in chop. That's a huge pet peeve of mine to even hear that, because that means you didn't have enough air, you're not properly inflated, and half the snorkels are open on the top anyway. So if it's that bad, A, you shouldn't have been diving, or B, you came up in it and you keep your regulator in. And the emergency scenarios, that's why I say keep one in the pocket, but again, they're just so unlikely. Literally, I've seen it hundreds, if not thousands of times, cause problems, get in the way. Divers just wearing them to wear them. For me, there's certain scenarios where you need them, and there's certain situations where they make sense. But in general, on the dive itself, the whole, I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm fine wearing a giant helmet in my head in this room, but life's better without it when you know and understand and have that ability to know why you're wearing it and when to wear it. Blanket helmet wearing is what it kind of feels like to me. I know a lot of people disagree on this. I'm not saying I'm against them. They have their purpose. You should have them for certain dives. I recommend carrying a roll-up snorkel in most situations, and definitely having one in your bag. I've put them on 1,000 million times. I'm not against them, but I am against blindly wearing them throughout the dive. And if you notice on the background of the picture where we did our interview, Scubapro doesn't even put them on in their photos. I'm guessing because of how ridiculous they look. Again, just my opinion. Thank you for watching. Whether or not you agree or disagree, put it in the comments. I love you anyways. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you on the next show.